be doing more proofs, this time using the other postulates that you guys have learned. So this time we're going to be using a little bit different postulates, but it's still the same concept. So hopefully it makes you guys understand what we did Friday a little bit better. So we talked about these two things on Friday. I really don't think I need to reread through these. I read through them with you on Friday. So if you would like to read those again, you can on your own at some point. So let's get started here. So it says WY bisects angle WX or XWZ, and it also bisects XYZ. So I'm going to start by splitting this up into two different pieces here so that it's easier to understand what this is saying. Do you guys understand that? So I'm going to start by saying WY bisects angle XWZ, and that's given. So look at your guys' single sheet of paper. Before we do anything else, look at your single sheet of paper. What does that mean for us? If you look at that single sheet of paper, what should we be using there? What should we be using for a reason there? Look at the step 3 and see which one of those things you should be using. Definition of what?
Angle bisector.
It's an angle bisector, right? It's a bisector, so you should be looking at the two bisects one, and then you have to ask yourself, is it a segment or an angle? In this case, it's an angle. So it tells you in 3C to name two congruent angles. So your angle is XWZ, right? Do you see this angle here? And it's being cut by WY. Do you guys see that there? So what two angles are congruent then? Logan?
YXW and YZW.
These two angles are congruent? Is it touching
Wait, no.
the...
XWY and ZWY.
Are you saying those two angles? Do you see how these two angles use this blue side and the red side and the blue side? At first, Logan said, and I'm fine that you did that. I like when you guys make mistakes so you guys can see the difference between the two. At first, Logan said this here, right? Do you see how these angles don't even use a red side then? Like the cutting bisect part? So it doesn't use the bisecting part. You need to use the side of the original angle plus the bisecting part. Do you guys all understand what I'm saying there? So as he said, these two angles are congruent, so I'm going to mark them. So angle XWY is congruent to angle ZWY. So that's my first given information. Again, this is an angle bisector, so we're going to say definition of angle bisector. But we have another piece of given information that I would like to address too. So I'm going to do that next. I split it so you guys could see that it's two different pieces. Do you guys see that? I wanted you guys to see that there are two different things because it's kind of confusing how it's written. So we also know WY bisects angle XYZ. So angle XYZ is this green angle here, and WY is still this red part here. So what two angles are congruent? Because we're doing that same thing. We're defining an angle bisector. So what two pieces are congruent there? What do we know? What two angles are congruent on that green angle that I have outlined here? So I'm looking at XYZ being cut by this here. What two angles are congruent? Can you not see it? Is that why you're not answering? Or are you just not answering because you don't want to say anything? Where are we at? Can you not see the two angles that are congruent? I need to know where you guys are at. Tell me, if you can see it, raise your hand. Just raise your hand if you can see which two angles are congruent. Okay. If you can't, put your hands up. I'm not going to call on anyone specifically right now. You can't see which two angles. Okay. So it's important that you guys realize that if I just look at W, Y, Z separately, so So I just pulled that out. Huh?
W-Y.
Oh, I changed the letter. Thank you. If I pull that out and I look at it separately, and I see that it's being cut by WY, can you see two angles there? A little bit easier. Maybe. Do you see how I just pulled that out a little bit? Do you see that then we're referring to these two angles here? Do you guys see how there's two angles right there if I pull that out? So sometimes you guys are going to need to redraw things to see things, all right? So, Harmony, tell me which two angles are congruent then. XYW is congruent to what? Very good. And another thing that a lot of you guys are doing wrong is you're not doing extra markings. So do you see how this angle already has a single arc here? These angles are not congruent to these angles. So you need to do a double angle here marking so that we know that they're different congruents. And why is that, Harmony? What's the reason we wrote it down? Yep, we see the word bisects here, and that it's bisecting an angle, so we use definition of an angle bisector. Okay, is that enough information to prove the two triangles congruent? Do we have 3 pieces of information in each triangle? Do we have 3 pieces of information in each triangle yet? No, Jill, what else do I know? Look at that step 2. Step 2 tells us we can look for reflexive, vertical angles, base angles, linear pairs, anything like that. Do we have anything like that? What side do they share? So WY is congruent to WY by what, Jill? Good. They are congruent by the reflexive property. Now, do we have enough information? Okay, Hunter. Do we have enough information to prove those two triangles are congruent? Okay, by what? What letters are these? So we have 2 angles. So it's either angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. Which one is it? The side is between the 2 angles, right? So it's angle, side, angle. So those are your 2 options, right, when you know 2 angles. So kind of choose between those 2. And the side is between it, so it's angle, side, angle. Questions on that one? All right, so let's look at a flowchart proof next. All right, so first of all, it tells RQ is parallel to TQ, and RQ is also congruent to TU. So which one of these boxes is going to be our prove statement? Which one of those boxes is going to be the prove? The bottom middle one right down here. Do you see how there's 3 arrows flowing to that, which is 3 pieces of information from a triangle to prove it? So you'll notice that these 2 just go directly into it. Do you guys see that? But this one takes another path through it. Which one of your given information is going to need to be used for something else? Which piece of given information will be needed to use for something else, Greg?
The parallel.
The parallel. If you look on your sheet of paper, what does it tell you to look for with parallel lines, Greg?
The alternate interior angle.
Yeah, you can look for alternate, corresponding, any of those things that we talked about last unit. So this one needs to be RQ parallel to TU. And we're going to have to come up with something from that. So RQ, using these arrows here, is parallel to TQ, or to TU. I see multiple transversals here. Do you guys see multiple transversals here? Do you guys see different transversals here? So which transversal, Devin, would you like to use? Remember, the transversal is the line that touches both parallel lines, okay? If you remember back to that word. So which one do you want to use? Because I see two. Which line segment touches both parallel lines? RU. So we're using parallel or transversal RU. Could you have used QT as well? Yeah, it doesn't matter which transversal you use, but that's the one that we've specified, okay? So if we are looking at that with that transversal, do we have alternate interior angles? Kylie, do we have alternate interior angles if we look at it with transversal RU?
Yes.
What are your alternate interior angles? You do. You're right. What are your alternate interior angles? Remember, like if you're looking up here, because it's color-coded, it might be a little bit easier. Remember, they need to be touching both a parallel line and the transversal to create the angle.
Okay, can we do QRS?
And
SUT?
perfect. Those are congruent angles by alternate interior angles because lines are parallel. Now, did you have to use 3 letters on this one? Did she have to use 3 letters? No, because there's no other angle at R or no other angle at U. Is it okay that she did? Yes, it's completely fine. So we know that angle QRS is congruent to angle SUT by alternate interior angles. So I have those marked. We have another piece of given information, right? We know that RQ is congruent to TU. Can we come up with anything else with that given information? Is there anything else we know because of that given information? Can you pull anything else from that? Sadly, no. So then we look at step 2 on that sheet of paper. In that sheet of paper there, it tells us to look for things like reflexive and vertical angles and linear pairs and base angles theorem. Because we only have 2 pieces of information right now. We have an angle and a side. Do we have any of that information there? Can we use any of that information? Do we have any reflexive property this time? Do they share a side? Do they share a side? No. Do you have vertical angles this time? Yes. Olivia, what are my vertical angles?
QSR and CSU.
Did she have to use 3 letters this time?
Yes.
Look at it. Greg, if I said angle S, would you know what angle I'm referring to?
No.
No. Do you see how there's 4 angles right here at it? So think about it that way. If you say a single letter, do you know which angle, if you were to tell that to somebody, would they know which angle you're referring to? Does that make sense? So in this case, you definitely need the 3. She did a good job there. So this is angle QRS is congruent to angle UST, and that is by the vertical angle theorem. Do we have enough information now to prove these 2 triangles congruent? Do we have enough information now to prove these 2 triangles congruent? Do we have 3 markings on both of them? Okay, what's my reason? Before I say these 2 triangles are congruent, what is my reason, Ian? Look up here. Look at your markings. What do you know? How many angles in a side?
2.
You know 2 angles in a side. So you have angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. Which one is this one? The side is not between it, so it's angle, angle, side. Do you see how you can look at it pretty easily and see that? So this is angle, angle, side. So that's triangle RQS is congruent to triangle UTS. Questions there? How are we doing? Do you guys kind of see how to use this sheet of paper? Don't want to throw your phone on the floor. Do you guys kind of see how to use this piece of paper a little bit better now? Is it helping you a little bit better maybe? Day 2 of this, maybe doing a little bit more. All right, next one here. Iku, what would you do first? So I start with angle O, congruent to angle P. Iku, can you do anything else with that given information besides write it down? Can you do anything else with that? Huh? No. You don't have parallel, you don't have perpendicular, you don't have an angle bisector, you don't have a segment bisector, you don't have midpoint, so you don't have anything else you can do with that information. Do you guys see that there? Okay, so that given is exhausted. So then we're going to write down the other given. Iku, I'm going to ask you this again. Can we do anything with NO congruent to LP? Can we define anything from that? Can we define anything from that? Nope. Congruence does not allow us to do anything else, so that's just marked congruent. So we need to figure out something else because we only have 2 pieces of information and we need 3. So what is another piece of information that I know in this proof, Abby? What is another piece of information I know in this proof? By what? They are vertical angles, so she used vertical angles to continue on. So we have angle PML congruent to angle OMN. Oh, I'm just trying to count from the previous one. Do we have enough information now to prove these 2 triangles congruent? Okay, Morgan, what can we prove these 2 triangles congruent by? Okay, and they're congruent. What's your reason? Be careful. When you're proving them congruent, you're using one of the 4 pieces of information on number 4. Or not 4 pieces, sorry, that's 5. On number 4. Which one of those is it? Perfect. So angle, side proves those 2 triangles congruent. Okay, so you'll notice that we have 2 angles and a side, so it's either going to be angle, side, or side angle, or angle, side, angle. In this case, the side is outside of it, so it's angle. One more, and then, I think it's one more, right? And then you guys get to work on homework and ask me questions. Right. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Where does that piece of information need to go? Which box does that need to go in? First of all, does this allow us to find anything else? No, so Katie, which box does that have to go in?
Either the middle one or the one all the way to the right.
Yes, it can't go in this one because this one implies that there's more information before you get to the proof statement, right? So I'm going to put it in the middle one. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. We can't get anything else from that, so that's just given. Okay, so I'm going to write my other given in this one. GJ, it's the same thing, bisects EH at F. This is given. You see the word bisects. What kind of bisector is this? What kind of bisector is this one? It's a segment bisector, so you're going to mark 2 segments congruent. Do you see how they're segments? Don't tell me 2 angles are congruent. So JG is this line here, is bisected with EH at F. So what 2 pieces are congruent then? EH is the knife. So EH is your knife that just slice that in half. Which 2 are congruent, Cameron?
Angle, segment EF, and HS.
That's the knife. Be careful. JG, oh, sorry, you're right. JG cuts EH. I read it wrong. JG cuts EH at F. You are correct. Sorry about that. So JG is cutting EH at F. So you said EF and FH, right? Perfect. That's not right. And what did you use as your reason, Cameron?
Definition of segment bisector.
It's a segment, so it's definition of a segment bisector. So I'm going to mark that. Do I know anything else? Because this is not enough information yet. Hayden?
Angle raised
By what? Is that enough information now? Is that enough information now? So, Helena, why are these two triangles congruent? The side is between them, so it's angle, side, angle.